Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. This is the weekend edition where we interview notable people from the world of real estate investing. We've got a great guest this weekend, but first, a quick thank you to our sponsor. Today's show is brought to you by the Secrets of Successful Syndication. If you've exhausted your own funds to invest in real estate, you've just brought your own investment career to a halt. Developing the skill to raise capital legally, reliably, and professionally might be just what you need to unlock the ceiling to your investment portfolio. This 2-day workshop maps out how to transform your business into one where you enlist the help and capital of others to scale your portfolio. It's hosted by my good friends Robert Helms and Russell Gray of the Real Estate Guys radio show. They're such a class act. February 15th and 16th in Dallas, Texas. It'll be a chance for us to meet in person as well. For more information, go to victorjm.com/events. That's victorjm.com/events. And click on the link for the Secrets of Successful Syndication. We are back here on the weekend edition. We've got a great guest this weekend, all the way from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the show, Chuck Sutherland.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, Chuck, you've done a lot of work in a number of different avenues. You've been a developer. You've built all kinds of different asset classes. Why don't you give us a little bit of your backstory and how you got into this crazy world of real estate investing?
Well, when I was 20 years old, this broker in town brought my dad and me a deal that was for a piece of land that was along an area. He said that the city was going to expand the road, and the property was for sale for $20,000. And my dad put up $10,000, I put up $5,000, and the broker put up $5,000. Bought the land, and 9 months later, we sold it for $80,000. We bought it for $20 and sold it for $80. And I was at that moment, I was addicted to real estate.
Isn't that such a common story? You know, the first deal might be a very simple property, and then you get hooked.
I got hooked. Yep.
Fast forward to today, you've done a bunch of different asset classes, self-storage, hotels, all kinds of different things. We'll probably spend the bulk of the time on self-storage, but tell us a little bit of the journey. How'd you get there?
Well, I started out, after I got made a little money on that property. I helped build a commercial building, and we made a little money on that building. And then I started trying to do deals on my own. Sometimes I made money, sometimes I lost money. At one point in time, I decided I was going to start consulting, and particularly I loved the idea of self-storage. So I went to a man in town who had really was one of the founders of the self-storage industry, and he gave me plenty of research to do for sites he was looking at, and demographic work, like population and site locations. And so I learned for quite a few years. And then there was a time I came along, I just wasn't making very much money doing that. I was a single father. I was raising 4 kids, and it was just really tough. And I went back to my friend who had me do consulting work for him. I told him I wanted to find a way to make more money. And sitting right there in his office, he offered me a partnership in his development company. And we started looking for properties that had been foreclosed on or were in trouble. And we bought several properties, remodeled them, turned them around, added to them. And then we started building new projects, particularly in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so I got started doing that. And then we built a lot of properties, remodeled a lot of properties, but we still own pieces of all those properties and have cash flow coming in on them. Every quarter we get our check. So that was my self-storage journey.
So the self-storage industry seems to have gone through a lot of transformation over the last several years. I'm by no means an expert in it, but my observation, you've got the mom and pops. They're still out there. There's a lot of institutional money coming into storage, and some larger, real professional players that are coming in, buying and building large portfolios. What's your perspective?
The industry has transformed dramatically over the last couple of years. There's been, last 15 years, 20 years, there's been a lot of real estate investment trusts who raise enormous amounts of money, and they go in and they buy property, or sometimes they build properties, 100,000 square feet, big properties, new, modern, and they don't have any mortgages against those properties. They're all free and clear. So they can come in, they buy a big property, they professionally manage it. They're never going to lose it no matter what the rates are. And so they have dominated the development of the industry. In fact, there are people that build just to sell to them. And then there's but there's always this gap between where the big players want to be at, the glitzy kind of location, high profile along the freeways. They particularly like that kind of location. And yet there's places where people that use self-storage live where there many times aren't a lot of self-storage around, or it's at least not convenient for them on their way to work or on the way to shopping. So the industry has changed, but there's continuing to be this gap. Now, what's also changed though in the industry is that it used to be that who rented self-storage was people who were primarily in apartments. And then when they moved, they would have a need for more space because they had moved all their stuff out of one place, moved into identically the same size space, but have stuff left over. And it just how packing and moving works. The change has been that approximately 15% of all households now either use or have used self-storage. So there's a dramatic increase in the number of people. It's also a dramatic increase in the type of businesses who use storage. Used to be the plumber used it to keep his pipe and his equipment in so he didn't have to have a warehouse. But today you've got CPAs that use storage. You've got retail stores that use storage because they pay a lot of money in the retail. They'd rather have a small retail space and a self-storage space to store their products. So it's a lot of changes in who uses self-storage.
How much of a factor is the aging of America? People as they downsize, maybe move into a condo from the old homestead in the suburbs, often have a lot more belongings than they can fit in that 1 or 2 bedroom condo, or maybe if they're moving into independent living, a lot of leftover stuff. How much is that a factor?
It's a big factor, and it's changed a lot. When the industry was young, there was people by age used storage mostly when they were younger and not so much when they were older. Today, we have so much stuff, and we don't throw stuff away. And many times people store stuff that's almost no value, but they don't want to go to clean it out and get rid of stuff. So as we've become a country of savers and hoarders to some great extent, the older people tend to have a lot more stuff these days than they did. So if they go to assisted living, like you said, or they're going to move to downsize their space, then they need more and more storage. It's one of the reasons the amount of storage per person is above 7 square feet per person in the United States. It's probably closer now to 9.
Wow.
So that's a lot of space, and it's been basically tripled over the last 30 years.
Fascinating. So from an investment strategy, what's the play? Are you looking for value-added plays? Are you looking to turn around distressed properties? What's your ideal transaction?
Well, today it's shifted. It used to be built new, but today the cost of construction has dramatically increased because of the cost of steel and the cost of labor. So today the play is to find properties that are not doing well. They're not well managed. What you said, mom and pop, but there's also places where people might own 2 or 3 properties and they don't have any kind of professional management. They don't have a real effective way to rent properties on the internet. They don't have the kind of security which I like to see in a property to protect people's goods. There's these mismanaged properties, and whenever there's a recession comes on, those properties go into foreclosure faster because they're not properly managed and the owners really haven't paid attention to maintenance, and they're the ones that go vacant first, if you're not taking care of maintenance and other things. So I think the play today and what we look at today is mostly properties that are either not up to their full potential or mismanaged or financially not structured properly, high debt or high payments, and or the owner who can't go borrow money against a property because their credit has been ruined for one reason or another. So the play is to look for properties that are for sale or in foreclosure or mismanaged, and then buy those and turn them around.
What about certainly industrial spaces? I'd say continent-wide shortage of industrial space right now as commerce has shifted more from storefront retail to e-commerce. We're seeing a lot of demand for warehouse space. Typically is renting for about $12 a square foot, something like that on an annual basis. As a storage facility, if you were to repurpose that and build it out on the interior, what kind of rents can you get per square foot if you convert that to, say, highest and best use?
Well, it depends where the location is. If it's warehouse space that's near downtown, where there's a resurgence of population moving in and remodeling, you can get a very high rate. And it varies all across the country because, California is a different market than Florida. And the Northeast has a lesser demand, but it has to be climate controlled. So there's this huge difference in the country. So there really is no rule of thumb. But there definitely is a switch in changing usages. And particularly I'm seeing more of the change in the usage of retail properties, big retail boxes that have been vacated by chains that either gone out of business or downsized. Those spaces are on good highways, good roads, and it's very simple process to refit that building like that for storage, because basically you got a big open space. You've got this open space, and mostly the interior that you would be retrofitting is partitions that you bring in, steel partitions you bring in, and you fit them in, they rivet together, and you end up with a storage space. It doesn't cost that much to do that. I mean, it costs money, but it doesn't cost us anywhere near as much as new construction. So retail space that's vacant is now being repurposed to self-storage.
We've seen a tremendous amount of growth in storage here in North America. One of the things that I've noticed, if I go to Europe, I see almost no self-storage anywhere. And I think about areas like the south of Portugal, where you've got a lot of Brits that own second homes there. They may want to rent those places out during parts of the year. They have no place to store their belongings in the off season when those properties are out for rent. I think there should be a tremendous demand for that market. There's a real problem, and yet no one seems to be servicing it. I'm just stunned that it doesn't exist. What's your perspective?
Well, I have a little opinion, but it's, self-storage was originally a North American phenomenon when it started. Then it's expanded to Canada. I've done some consulting work in Canada on projects. They've been picking up on using self-storage for household goods and for businesses. In Europe, there's a whole different culture and history. There's not as much of the collecting history as we in the United States have. We collect and keep everything. If you would go to some of these auctions, self-storage auctions, you would see when they open the unit and they sell the goods and they start pulling stuff out, mostly it's things like old newspapers, old magazines. It's like stuff that nobody was ever going to use again.
Right.
In Europe, my perspective on it is that they don't have in Europe the same hoarding mentality as, and I mean hoarding not like on television, like the extreme cases,
right,
but we hoard things and keep things. I mean, I have a garage. In my garage, I have a whole cabinet filled with old electronic parts, like chargers and old parts to cameras I haven't owned in 30 years. So we tend to save stuff. And in Europe also, there's a tradition of frugality, of saving money. And we haven't had that as much here. There's also a tendency to have cellars in many European countries. People store stuff in their cellars. That's true in the Northeast a little bit as well, in Minnesota and Wisconsin, is people have a basement or a storage place and they store down there. It's coming, though. I've seen projects being announced in Europe. They're nice projects. One of the problems they got is the location. Getting a self-storage project to work in a dense metropolitan area is very difficult. So, but what I've seen is especially in areas that are affluent, a rise in self-storage projects, but because they have a lot less density of people per square mile. But they also, they have many times condos. There's no room for storage. So you have a condo in the south of Spain, or you have a place in France. You really don't have a lot of extra room in many vacation kind of areas. So it's coming, but it's been really pretty slow.
I love it. So as you're looking to grow the portfolio, what's your capital source? Are you out there raising money? Do you work with institutional investors? How have you been doing that?
Well, it depends on the partner, because many years ago came to the conclusion that I work best with partners who can tell me when I'm not thinking straight, or they can catch me if I'm about ready to make a mistake, and vice versa. The partner I started out with, I told you about earlier, basically he had so much money in the bank from his previous investments in self-storage that he just went to the bank and they loaned him the entire amount of money to build a project. Now those properties are almost all free and clear because he paid them off as we went along. Today, I personally like to have local partners. So for example, I live in Dallas. And I've looked at projects recently in the Tucson, Phoenix area. And if I'm going to go down there, I want a local partner who's going to bring more than just money to a transaction. I want somebody who's going to bring their unique expertise, like a builder or like a management company. I'm looking for the deal first. And if you find a deal that works and tie it up and design it, you will find the money. There's no shortage of money in this country. In fact, since the dramatic expansion we've had in the money supply because of the last recession, there's lots of money out there looking for deals. And it's pretty afraid of risk, but there's a surplus of money. What's missing is a deal that makes sense.
We're seeing the same thing in multifamily as well. There's a lot of money chasing a very small number of deals. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
They can either send me an email at my email, which is chuck@creativerealestatenetwork, all one word, .com. Or I do have one of the books I've written on how to buy real estate using something other than cash. I've bought properties using land as a down payment to buy an improved property, as an example. They can get a copy of that book by going to creativerealestatenetwork.com/podcast. And I'll gift them that book in a digital format.
I love it. So folks, definitely reach out to Chuck at creativerealestatenetwork.com/podcast. Go get a copy of his free ebook. And in the meantime, thank you, Chuck, for joining us. Have a great rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow.